I'm going to talk about the name cards that I use in class. What is with this guy and the name cards? Yeah, I know. But they're really central to a lot of the things I do in class, and they're right in front of me, so they're easy to talk about. They're color-coded, obviously, so I can tell the classes apart easily. And incidentally, I use Excel for all my grading, and each class has a corresponding colored tab, so that's easy. I use a really thick paper. It's a A4 size paper, as a full size paper, but I just cut it in half. I use thick paper because it stands up nicely like this on the desk. And because this thing will be folded many times over the year and I don't want it to fall apart. Although, a colleague of mine who stole this idea, and I'm happy he did, he uses normal flimsy paper and he folds it in half and then folds it in half again. It doesn't stand up the same way, but it's a lot cheaper. One sheet of this costs about 30 or 40 yen. Anyway, the reason I started using cards was not actually to memorize students' names, because I was already doing that before I started using cards. The reason is a colleague asked me to correct one of her papers, and it was about autonomy. And after reading the paper, I thought maybe I should include some autonomy in my class. And this is one way I thought to do it, because the students can see their attendance, so they can stop asking me about their attendance, and they can see their scores and everything. I'll talk about it in depth right now. Okay, so here's the front of the card, and as you can see, there are some useful classroom phrases on the top written in English and Japanese. So anytime somebody asks me something like, "Noryoku wa eigo de wa nani desu ka?" then I tell them to ask me in English. The bottom part here, you can see the date for each class, and then there's a participation score. This is part of the autonomy. I want them to reflect on what they've done in class, even just a little bit at the end of each class. So what I tell them is that an 8 out of 10 is basically they've done what I've asked them to do. And if they have spoken English or tried less than they were supposed to, then they should give themselves a lower score. If they speak English, for example, even when I don't ask them, if they're speaking English with their partner about something else, then they can give themselves a higher score. As for the vocabulary, I do a vocabulary test at the beginning of each class, and I'll explain that later, but anyway, there's a score for that. And also, this class uses a text that has listening in it, and they write their score out of 20 every class. Incidentally, this textbook is called The English Gym, and it's written by my buddy John. It's good text, and I recommend it. This card is a student's card, and it's for a writing class. You'll see we have the same participation because I do have speaking activities in my writing class, but also they can write their writing participation, how much they've done during class. It's basically their effort. My writing classes also have vocabulary drill and a diary word count. I'll explain this more in depth later, but basically what it is they write a diary for 10 minutes. It's like a writing fluency exercise, and at the end of it, they count how many words they've written, and they can see if they're writing more words or less words as time goes on. Of course, some topics are more difficult than others, so I don't expect a linear up line, but anyway. And then there's just miscellaneous notes because I had the space. This is from a student's card that doesn't have a text. This class, I don't use a text. Everything's the same except this fluency time. I do speaking fluency exercises where they have to do the same conversation 3 times in a row, and they write their first time and their last time. Well, this student didn't improve that much. What is this? This is 7. Oh, this is better. This is 7 minutes and 7 seconds and 4 seconds, the length of their conversation. So they do it 3 times, and they write the time it took to do the first take and the time it took to do the third take, so they can see how much faster they're speaking. This is my card from a speaking class that uses a text called 50/50. It's a really old text, but I really love it. You can see all the similar things. We have listening, like the other speaking class. They have scores on their listening. They vary. And then we have a place to write quizzes and tests. I write these scores, the quizzes and test scores, in my Excel file after the students do the test, because I collect the tests, because I don't want the tests getting out so people copy. But all the other scores, they are responsible for writing, and I tell them, if you don't write your vocabulary drill score, it's not going in my Excel file, and then your score will be lower. If you don't write your listening score, same thing. So they're responsible for doing that. Okay, so there's an overview of the cards. As you can see, the students can keep track of their attendance. So students no longer come to me and say, "Sensei, how many times have I been away?" And also they reflect every class, at least a little bit, a few seconds, on what they've done during the class. Of course, the lower level students give themselves 10 out of 10 all the time, or not all the time, and the higher level students are more hard on themselves, but these scores really are just for them to reflect. I have a totally separate participation score that I give each student, so the scores that they write on the card have no bearing on their grade. The students know the makeup of the grades, or at least they know what they're being scored on, because it's written there on the card, and they can kind of see how they're doing, how they're progressing. So yeah, there's some autonomy there and some responsibility, and it's a good way to keep their names out so you can see them and memorize them. So I really recommend using cards.